This is my dive on the Cedarville, which is in Lake Huron at the Straits of Mackinac, but it's on the Lake Huron side of the bridge. As you can see here, we are descending. We are doing a free descent. We're not going down an anchor line because the water visibility was such on this particular day that we saw the wreck and the divers below us, as well as their bubbles. That made it much easier to see them. We were on DPVs, and so we decided to just take a shortcut and descend where we were at as opposed to going to the anchor line first. It worked out well for us because here we are on the wreck. This was my second dive on the Cedarville. I was diving with two buddies, and it was their first time on the wreck, and we had quite an aggressive dive plan for this trip. For better or worse, and it was both. Part of our plan is we were going to check out the engine room and try to get to the boiler room, and that was a success mostly, although we had some problems there as well. Then we were going to try to get to the dining room, and the plan was to enter the area through one of these doors or make our way to the dining room. That did not go well, but we did check out that bunk room in the bottom part of the shipwreck as it lays currently. After penetrating in these areas, we were then going to make our way to the bow of the ship, and we'll get more into that part of the dive plan as we get closer to it. I like to just play the video from start to finish with very little to no editing. And one of the reasons I like doing that is it allows me to debrief myself on the dive, see what went well, what went poorly, where mistakes were made so that I can learn from them and not repeat them in the future. And also just to see the wreck again in a controlled environment so that I can make my next future dive plans. And all of these things are going to happen as I watch this video with you. Most of it I'll comment on out loud, but not all of it. Sometimes I'll just make a note to myself mentally. I'm wearing a helmet, and on the helmet is my GoPro as well as a video light, which creates a lot of backscatter. Unfortunately, the video light that I would normally have on my wrist malfunctioned, and I was left without that as an option. So the video light on my head, just an inch or two from the camera, is all that I had available, which was better than nothing, but as you're going to see, there's a whole lot of backscatter, and the visibility inside the wreck is probably worse on video than it was in person, although it wasn't great in person once it got silted up, which is extremely easy to do. One of my buddies has a lot of experience as a mechanic, so once we got into the engine room, he leads, because he knows what he's looking at, and all I know is, hey, look, it's an engine. So we're checking out, and we have the dive plans, which I'll link to below in the description, but we didn't see an obvious way to get to the engine room, so we're kind of exploring it at this point, and once we find our way in, my buddy's going to take the lead. It's worth noting, you saw the warning at the front of the video, but this is serious and dangerous diving. Entering shipwrecks is not something you should do unless you are properly trained, properly experienced, and feeling comfortable with it on the day of your dive. There's a lot of ways for your life to go south real fast when you're going to enter a shipwreck. In this wreck, you're going to see visibility poor because of silting. This particular wreck is also on its side at different angles at different points, which is disorienting. I had done this dive multiple times in my mind before I ever got here, and as soon as I enter the wreck, immediately I had to take a moment to figure out how this was laid out, because it's disorienting when it's on its side. So I'm going to say it again, and hopefully I'll say it a few more times throughout this video. Please don't try this unless you are in fact properly trained, properly experienced, and feeling positive about doing this dive when you are having the opportunity. And that's true of all diving, really. It's not just this wreck. Any overhead environment brings with it a great deal of risk. And we are just exploring to find a way into the engine room. In my mind's eye, I'm looking at the plans that I had studied quite well for this dive, and I'm thinking, well, this should be here and that should be there, and here comes one of my buddies to say I found the way in. Come back here. The Cedarville sank on May 7th, 1965. She's at a depth of about 110 feet. My max depth on this dive was 99 feet. 10 people died on this incident, during this incident, and one body has never yet been found. I know a lot of this stuff could have been edited out, but I just find it helpful to leave it in so that as I go back to study this for future dives, I can look for that one moment that the video caught something that I missed, that I'm trying to figure out. And so I leave it in there for myself, but also if you're using this as a way to dive this wreck before you get to the dive site, it's available for you as well. Check out every frame of it and try to figure out what you're looking for, because it may be something that the camera just quickly scans by that is exactly what you're looking for, which is why I leave it unedited, although I acknowledge that for most viewers that does not make for the most interesting of videos. But here we are entering the engine room area. It turns out that I don't know if this is a cutout or a doorway. Some pictures that I have found lead me to think that it could be either one. And as we're looking at it right now, what we would call the floor is actually the ceiling. And what we would see as the ceiling is the floor. There on the left-hand side, you see a table or some kind of railing maybe that's mounted to the ceiling, which is actually mounted to the floor. And you can get a sense real quick how this is disorienting. So one of our techniques to help find our way out is we place strobes every so often along our path, and so there my buddy placed a strobe that we're going to make sure that we find on the way out. But we're also constantly thinking about how am I going to get out of here if things go poorly. I am the middle diver, so I would argue that I've got the toughest spot because I got to keep up with the first diver and make sure that the third diver is always with us as well. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of a three-man team, but I like both of these guys, so I put up with them, really, is what I'm coming down to. There you can see that first diver is an outstanding diver, but just brushed a part of the wreck and visibility quickly goes south. So you can see it doesn't take much for visibility to go from pretty good inside of this wreck to, oh boy. Here we are on a ladder. There's diver 3. And I'm trusting that my buddy knows what he's looking at. And if you know engines, maybe you do as well, but I just see some cool gears and mechanical stuff and wish that I knew more about how these things worked. So now as we're making our way, the orientation of this wreck has shifted some, and what is now the left wall is actually the floor of the shipwreck. You see there's another table or bench or something mounted to the floor, which looks like it's on our left wall. And again, I think this really illustrates how quickly you get disoriented, and then you've got the visibility to deal with, because as you can see, it's getting worse as we continue to penetrate our way further into this wreck. One of the victims of this shipwreck, two of them actually, if I'm not mistaken, lost their lives as they were standing by their duty, doing their duty, standing by their station to the very end, and their bodies were found somewhere in this area. I'm not exactly sure where precisely, but they were found at their post, waiting for the captain's order to abandon ship, which never actually came. I'll get more into the history of this wreck in a moment. So on your left-hand side of the screen is the floor. On your right-hand side is the ceiling. The top and bottom are walls. Right as I was just about to put a strobe or start running a line, I see, hey, there's a big giant opening out of this place. And all of a sudden I'm feeling reassured again that I've got a way out. I can get here if I need to. And so the plan is working. You may choose to dive this dive differently. I encourage you to do whatever works for you, as long as you're thinking it through and planning appropriately and being smart about it. So I'm still familiar with where number 3 is at, and I know number 1 is off in that direction. And this is where I'm about to make my first mistake of the dive. It's recognizing this panel right here, and I get distracted. So I'm thinking to myself, this is probably where one of those sailors died. He's probably manning this station right here, doing his job. And I was taking a moment to reflect on that, and then I realized I don't know where number 1 is at anymore. So what am I going to do now? And we have a plan. The plan is that we kind of stay put and create a strobe scenario so that the divers ahead of us can start to make their way back when they realize that they are alone. In this case, it's just one diver ahead of me. So I'm going to follow through with the plan, and I'm going to just kind of wait it out here. I'm kind of looking for a place right now. I'm looking for diver 1 to see if I can see his light or his strobe or his body or anything, any indication of him. I don't want to just pick a direction, because I would pick one way and he would have gone the other, almost certainly. So I'm going to choose to start to make my way back a little bit. I'm looking for a spot to just kind of hang out and create a strobe for my buddy. Then I see that opening. I'm like, maybe that's as good a spot as any. Kind of checking stuff out. There's number 3, who's now, he and I are changing positions, which I'm not. He's going to follow me out. He's going to stay in the number 3 position. You can see visibility is not getting any better, but that doorway's right there waiting for us to get through it. Or not doorway, that hole in the ceiling, as the ship would have stood when properly up and downed. And it's at about this point I'm feeling like, all right, we've gotten separated. I'm waiting for diver 1 to return. He's not back yet. I'm kind of staying in the same spot. I'm exploring around in this area a little bit, but not a whole lot. Never ventured all that far from where we got separated. Visibility has gotten worse. I'm probably to blame. I'm going to go hang out here, and I'm going to make sure to create a big strobe for him, for diver 1, to find his way out of, because this is an opening to the outside world, and that's what you're looking for if you are lost inside of a wreck. So I've exited the wreck now. I've come out of what was the ceiling, is now on the left wall, or the wall, one of the walls of the shipwreck, but was the ceiling of the engine room. And I'm going to situate myself right at that opening, and I'm going to take my primary light and turn it into a strobe and I'm going to point it right in the direction that diver 1 and I got separated. So if he's trying to find his way out, I'm going to try to help him and assist him in that as best I can. That was my thought. That was my logic. I also got outside enough of the wreck because I was expecting diver number 3 to follow me out, and he's about to. As a team, we debriefed this much more than I'm going to do on YouTube now, and how we wish we would have done things differently, what needs to change, what needs to improve for next time. But that's why you do a debrief after the dive, so that you can learn from the mistakes and not repeat them, and in all likelihood make new ones next time. That's how life seems to work, right? So diver 3 is now exiting the wreck as well. Here I am turning that primary light into a strobe. And I am aiming it right in the direction in which we got separated. One of the books that I've read about this dive as we wait for diver 1 to get out was The Cedarville Conspiracy Indicting U.S. Steel, which was the company who owned the Cedarville, by L. Stephen Cox. I really enjoyed this book, and it gave me a whole lot of information. I didn't read it until after the dive, but I do want to point this out. One of the reviews on Amazon was written by Edward Brewster, who is a survivor of the series, of the Cedarville. And he wrote a review very critical of the book, claiming that there was false information and that the author, Mr. Cox, did not accurately report the events of this shipwreck and the conditions of the ship before leading into the wreck. So either way, you should take everything and be critical of everything and look for find the truth, with multiple sources. But I found that book to be incredibly helpful in just appreciating this wreck even more and knowing this story much better. I really recommend that book very highly, even if it isn't entirely accurate. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying Mr. Brewster said that it isn't. But I would recommend reading that book if you're wanting to really understand this shipwreck and what took place on May 7th, 1965. As you saw a few moments ago, diver number 3 has re-entered the area, the engine room. He's going to make his way towards where we last saw diver number 1, and it doesn't take them long to reconnect. Diver 1 was already on his way out, and he was fine, by the way. He just took a little longer to realize that we were separated, then took a little longer to turn himself around and make his way out. But here they are coming back to me. They reported having seen my strobe and that was a helpful beacon to assist them in finding their way out. It's just some of those frames there that I just whipped my head around that helped me understand why we were not able to make it to the dining room, or is giving me at least another clue as to why we were not successful in getting to the dining room as we had planned. And here you saw some beautiful mussels that are helping clean the Great Lakes, although they are an invasive species and have their own downsides as well as their benefits to the ecosystem. But we appreciate them making the visibility better in the water. So if you recall, as we entered the engine room, we did put down a strobe, and we need to go retrieve that. So we're making our way back the way we had come originally, so that we can pick up that strobe light. I don't think it quite showed up on camera, but the strobe was found, was recovered, and so we're making our way out from that easy opening there that I was sitting and waiting at. Here is the funnel of the ship. There's divers number 1 and 3. So, take a moment, everyone's good, yep, all right, let's continue on with the dive. Engine room was very cool. We want to definitely spend more time in it, but a big part of this this dive was to just kind of introduce everyone to the wreck, get a decent sense as to how she's laid out, and go from there. Plan future dives, and there's going to be many. The book, The Cedarville Conspiracy, Indicting U.S. Steel by L. Stephen Cox, it raised questions about the captains of the U.S. Steel, the company, pressuring captains to meet quotas, unreasonable quotas. Mr. Cox argued that forced the captains to cut corners, such as exceeding loading allowances, entering unofficial shipping channels, and taking extra risks that reduced safety. Cox and others also reported that U.S. Steel delayed replacement of weakened hull plates that may or may not have had anything to do in the sinking of the Cedarville, but it is important to point out that the U.S. Coast Guard had approved the request by U.S. Steel to delay repairs. So apparently the U.S. Coast Guard did not feel that they were pressing enough repairs that they needed to be made immediately. U.S. Steel requested a delay in those repairs, and the Coast Guard approved that request. So the plans that I have, that I've linked to in the description, are not the same plans that the wreck sits today. The Cedarville went through at least one redesign and made a lot of changes to it. And so the plans that I had helped give me an idea of what I was looking at and looking for. But I knew going into this dive that I couldn't trust them thoroughly because they weren't accurate. They may have been close, but they weren't exact. So here I'm looking into a doorway that I think is going to lead me into the kitchen and food stores area. And there was clearly a bunk bed there, and was certainly a place for the crew to sleep in their private area, their cabins, their berth. So I'm a little baffled right now because that was supposed to be a kitchen. And I'm going through in my mind as I'm looking around here, where was that bedroom in the plans, and what am I missing? And the plans showed more doorways than I'm seeing here on the wreck itself, and I'm just confused. But I do know that the plans can't be trusted, so now I'm looking for another way that I expected to be able to get into the dining room. There was nothing really particular about the dining room that made me want to visit it. It was just part of the plan. And so I planned my dive, and now I'm trying to dive my plan, and I'm looking for a way into the dining room because that's the next part of this adventure. And so far I'm a little frustrated because I haven't found it. So this doorway down here, I thought might lead to the dining room per the plans, or possibly a stairwell. Those were kind of the two thoughts that I had as I looked at the plans. And I'm going to make my way to it here in a moment and find out if the plans proved helpful in this case. And everything inside of me said I should be looking at a stairwell. And as I poke my head here, it's a bunk room. And I'm confused because as best as I know from the research that I did, there's only one level of this area, and it's not playing out at all like I expected it to from both the plans but also the pictures that I had seen as I researched for this dive. Here I'm going to show a couple of pictures, and if you look at these, I don't know, it looks to me like there's one level of this portion of the wreck, and I'm getting frustrated because I'm on that level and I'm not finding what I'm expecting to find. I'm thinking to myself, the plans show that there's a skylight over the dining room. The dining room. I'm thinking this might be it. That kind of looks like it could be glass, right? Where some of the muscles have been scraped away, and it feels more like glass than it does like metal. So I'm thinking, okay, this is the skylight, but it's also occurring to me the skylight's supposed to be in the center of the ship in this area, not on the side of it. And that is clearly on the side. So it's not making sense to me. And it's about at this point that I realize I have a new favorite wreck, and it's the Cedarville. I mean, one, this is a real wreck, a true wreck, which in my circle means it wasn't intentionally sunk to create a diver's playground or an artificial reef. This was sunk by nature and or human error. That's what we call real wrecks. So that's one reason that I like this wreck. Reason number two is it's in the Great Lakes, and I love diving the Great Lakes. They're my backyard, and I really enjoy diving the Great Lakes. Number three is it's sitting on its side at different angles, and that adds a new level of challenge to these dives. And four, this isn't going as I planned, which means I have to return to figure out where I went wrong and correct that, because, well, I've got to go see the dining room now, right? I don't really have a choice, do I? So again, I'm looking at the wreck, and I'm trying to overlay the plans in my mind as to what these doors should be leading to, and nothing about them, according to the plans, should lead to a bedroom. And here we are, and that sure looks like a bunk bed to me. It does not make sense. Now, we've spent some time in the engine room. The way to the dining room is not proving to be accurate. And we also wanted to check out the wheelhouse. So at this point, oh look, another bedroom. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, well, this is going to have to be solved on future dives. Let's go check out the wheelhouse. But I'm just confused. So there, I've communicated with my buddies. Let's go check out the wheelhouse. And as we get set to put our DPVs on and make our way to the bow, let me show you this picture, which I did not find until I was continuing to research this wreck after diving it. And this picture shows that there's actually two levels to this part of the wreck. And it's after most of the revisions have been made, and it appears that we are on the top level, and we want to be one level down, typically, as the ship would have sat. And that should have led us to the kitchen and the dining room. Pay attention to the smokestack here, because that's a giant clue as to whether you're looking at the original ship as it originally was built, or if you're looking at it after at least some, if not most, of the major changes to the ship. And you can see that the smokestacks are the same. We're looking at images after the renovations, and it just didn't appear to me that there were two layers to this this housing area, this part of the ship. So I had done my research. I thought I was making a solid plan, and when I got on the wreck, it didn't match what I was expecting to see. And so back on land with some more research, I figured out where I'd gone wrong, and now I got to go back and dive it some more. We're still kind of just getting settled here into our DPVs and situated, and everything's good to go, and we're now going to take off toward the bow. This is a large wreck. Not necessarily something you want to swim back and forth on. She's about 588 feet in length, and to try to do all of this in one dive would be asking a lot, and it was. But boy, did we have fun, and the DPVs helped a great deal. The first time I dove this wreck, I saw the actual place where it was struck by the Topdalsfjord, which is the ship that hit it, causing the incident and causing her to sink. Although, as I will talk more about in a bit, the Topdalsfjord was cleared of any wrongdoing. There's another door. That's the engine room again, I think. That's not the kitchen. Actually, we may have been closer at that point than I thought we were. Because when I went back and studied the plans a bit more closely, frustrates me that we didn't find that. Anyway, the Topdalsfjord was cleared of any wrongdoing by the inquiries that took place after the sinking. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But I saw that collision point on my first dive, and so it was not on our plan to see it again, but I will link to that video so that you can check out that point if you'd like. But we're just going to scooter along here, and I can't really see much. But we're making our way toward the bow to check out the Wheelhouse. After we exited the engine room, I became diver 1 because I had done most of the research on this and made this dive plan. So I'm scootering in the number 1 position and keeping an eye on number 2 to make sure that I don't lose him. We've already done that once today. Let's not do it again. Here I think is where the collision took place. So our plan is to go and check out the forecastle deck. We're going to check out the captain's room. We're going to kind of loop around in that area. We're then going to make our way, well, we're going to enter the area, the the forecastle deck from the X there, and loop around. We're then going to make our way to the pilot house, and you're just going to kind of see us check that area out. We're just swimming around that whole area. And when that's done, we're going to check out the spar deck. There's an opening in this part of the structure that we think we can get into. We don't. It wasn't part of our plan. But it's certainly going to be part of future plans. And we're also going to later in the video check out this hallway entering from that area. We're not actually going to enter, but we're going to just stick our heads in and see some of those bedrooms. But too much time had passed. That was kind of the last idea of the dive, if we had time, and we didn't, so we left that alone. So like I said, this is an aggressive plan. You should not plan on diving this much of the wreck on one dive. We're all on rebreathers. We all have our DPVs. This is a technical dive. We are absolutely incurring decompression obligation. We're all properly trained, and we're all comfortable with this. So this is the doorway that we're going to enter, right where that X was that I put on the blueprints, or the deck plans. All throughout this dive, I'm like I said, I had dived this dive many times in my head before we ever got to the dock. And that served me well, but also didn't, because I had a hard time. I'm like, well, there should be this right here, and it's not. And I had a hard time, even though I knew that the deck plans were not going to be absolutely accurate. As that proved to be the case, I would get a little confused and start to question, am I on this deck or that deck? Am I where I think I am on the wreck? This is part of that. As I read those deck plans, I'm expecting to see a bathroom, and there's not one. Well, I'm expecting to see a bathtub, and there's not one. But wait for it. So I'm questioning: am I on the deck that I think that I am? Am I one above it, one below it? Where am I at? But there should be a bathtub right here. And I've seen other videos. There is a bathtub. It's still there, or at least there was when those videos were shot underwater. So I'm confused. That's okay. I'm going to keep making my way through. I see that I have exit points, so I'm feeling much more comfortable here. It's a lot more room, fewer things to get caught on, fewer things. And you saw a bed frame there, maybe a headboard type of thing. There it is again. So I'm pretty sure I'm in a bedroom. But this is not matching the deck plans as I saw them and understood them. So figuring it out. readjusting things in my mind as I'm seeing the wreck for myself, which again is why I like looking at the video and seeing it in its entirety as opposed to just snippets, because this will help me plan for the next dive as I adjust how those plans sit in my memory. According to the plans, and it looks like this would still have been true after the renovations, that this is something of a lounge area. Looks like that might be a couch, maybe? It looks like there's a table at one point. It is illegal to take anything off of a shipwreck in the Great Lakes, so don't do it. I was a little surprised. This space was smaller than I was expecting it to be. Which makes sense. I mean, this is not where the companies made their money, by housing and comfort of passengers. This is a working ship that was hauling material, and so you'd want to maximize hauling space and minimize everything else. Still, it felt smaller than I was expecting. But what is that over there? That looks like it could be a bathtub. What do you think? Looks like a bathtub to me. It isn't where the deck plan said it would be, but it is there. And there's a chair in the foreground there. You can see it's sitting the way you would expect a chair to sit, even though it's on the ceiling, or it seems like it's on the ceiling of the ship as you currently sits, and you're lower, well, moving around there in the bottom. But I'm in that space. This is where the captain of the Cedarville at the time of the accident was Captain Martin Japich. We'll talk more about him in a bit. That would have been his stateroom. So having seen the bathtub, I'm now reassured that I am on the deck that I think I am, and putting things together, I'm thinking, okay, this should be the captain's room, and this should be, where he was working and living, and on the opposite side of the ship should be like a prestigious guest, because the plans would suggest that they also had a nice bathtub. And but I didn't see one, so again, a lot of changes were made to the ship that may have been lost. I was also surprised how few artifacts were in these spaces. I would have expected to see more stuff. Now, I know some salvage occurred. The logs of the ship were recovered shortly after the sinking by divers. I'm sure there's been some scuba divers who have taken stuff off of the ship that they weren't supposed to. But it felt very bare to me. So we're exiting the forecastle deck, and we're now going to head toward the pilot house, which would be on top of it. Or, in the present condition, underneath it. Out of those windows is currently water, but on the day of the sinking it would have been fog, so it probably would have looked very similar to this, just have been white instead of that greenish tint. But on May 7th, 1965, the fog was very thick, and the crew were relying on radar to help guide them through these waters. They really couldn't see much of anything until it was within about 100 feet of it. And at this point, we're aware of our dive time, our bottom time. We know what our run time is planned to be. We were thinking about checking out another deck, but time is getting away from us here. There was another man who lost his life in the wheelhouse. He was sticking in his position as long as he could, and as she was rolling over, he was trying to get out, and he just wasn't able to get up the angle of the floor and out that door. So, if I'm not mistaken, that is the body that was never found, never recovered. The story and the events of this sinking were very well told in the Cedarville conspiracy. And if you're interested, if you really want to understand this wreck and this story, check out that book. Give it a read. Take it for what it's worth. Is, I'm sure, honest and intentional reporting of accuracy, but with some potential criticism of it as well, and really hear of the events that went down. I'm not interested in doing the story where I just tell the story of the Cedarville sinking. There's another video about it, and I'll link that video. There's a few others that I found on YouTube, but one that I found helpful, I'll link to the description below if you want to just hear the story of this wreck. As we make our way back to the anchor line in a bit, I'll tell a little bit of the story, but not nearly to the extent that other videos have. This is where I pointed out we found an opening to, well, let's find out what we found the opening to, shall we? Looks like a pretty big size opening. You can get through that, can't you? Sure. What's inside there? Doesn't look like a whole lot of anything. There's another passage that leads there, but that looks a little, maybe a little cumbersome to get in there. Alright, that's further that way. It looks like silt, obstructions. Maybe we'll take another look at that on another dive. This does look like a passageway. Now what about this opening? What's in here? Yeah. I believe this is the windlass and where the anchor would have been stored, and the anchor plays an interesting role in the sinking of the Cedarville. There's a doorway there, so clearly there's a passageway into this. Is that opening large enough for a diver to get into? We may find out at another time. Now, I'm pretty sure I know how to get to this spot based on the deck plans. We just don't have the time to do so on this dive. Like I said, Cedarville. It's currently my favorite wreck. One of the reasons is because there's a lot more to see on her than I have already. I think that's a laundry tub there being illuminated by the light on what is now the ceiling. In fact, even as I'm watching this and narrating, and I remember there was a stairway from the captain's area, the captain's room, that may very well be leading to that space we were just looking at through the portholes. Or did that stairway go the other direction? So I'm going to have to rewatch this video and find out. This is why I do this. I'm reliving this dive. I'm going back and I'm checking stuff out so that I can plan my next dive. But boy, did I like this wreck. Hearing the story of the men who lost their lives on her makes me feel a connection as well with them. Another part of the plan that we wanted to do if we had time, as we made our way back, was we wanted to check out the self-loading upgrades to this wreck. That was the event that changed a lot of the structure of the wreck, as they added a self-unloader to it. To make the unloading of the material they were shipping easier. So the diver there ahead of me in the process there, you see his strobe on the, well, there it is. He was most interested in seeing that, so he's leading this part of the dive to go find that portion. And all this is in the cargo area, and we're not making our way into closed areas, so we are all reasonably confident that daylight is in sight of pretty much anywhere we're going to be on this part of the dive. I wanted to check that area out. I just wanted to check this area out a little bit more further, a little more closely first. partially because I want to find a way into that part of the ship that we were just looking at through the portholes. Our run time on this dive was 1 hour and 42 minutes. Part of that was decompression obligation, and I cut that part out of the video. As I watch this and record the narration, I'm wondering if anyone else is ever going to watch this part of the video or not. So if you do, please leave a short comment. I'd certainly appreciate it. Letting me know that you watched me this long. Here's the doorway that leads to the those bunk rooms that I pointed out on the deck plans. We poke our head in, but we don't go too far in because we just don't have the time at this point. So I've said several things throughout the video that talk about the events of May 7th, 1965 and what led to the Cedarville sinking. To sum it up, it was a very foggy day. They could barely see more than 100 feet in front of them. They were, all ships were relying on radar to help them navigate this area. And the Cedarville had made radio contact with a vessel, the Weisenberg. And the Weisenberg informed the Cedarville that a third vessel, the Topdalsfjord, was also in the area, but Cedarville could not get the Topdalsfjord on the radio. And no one's exactly sure why, because the crew of the Topdalsfjord, which is a Norwegian vessel, said that they heard other ships calling them, and were able to communicate with the other ships via the radio. But for whatever reason, and this is a true mystery, it was not able to hear or communicate. You wouldn't talk back to the Cedarville if you never heard them in the first place, but the Cedarville and the Topdalsfjord never made radio contact. And there's a little confusion as to whether or not the Cedarville even saw the Topdalsfjord on radar, but there were other signs. There were noises in the areas. The ships were sounding their horns, trying to let other ships in the vicinity know of their presence. Just back to the dive for a minute here, you can see that we're getting our DPVs on, and we're going to start making our way back, but we're also, if obvious, we're going to check out the self-loader part of the vessel, or unloader. So all of a sudden, the watchmen on the Cedarville see the Topdalsfjord coming straight at them, and Cedarville Captain Martin Jopic tries to do his best to maneuver the ship out of the way to avoid the collision, or at the very least minimize the collision. But by the time they see the vessel, it's too late, and the collision is imminent. It's amazing how the Topdalsfjord really just ripped into the Cedarville. And while efforts were made to save the Cedarville, its fate was established at that point. As I said, 10 men died. 10 of the Cedarville's crew died in this accident. Captain Jopic did not. He survived. And his story is worthy of being checked out. In the pursuing investigations that took place, the Topdalsfjord was cleared of all blame because it was decided that her crew, her captain, acted within the rules of the road of shipping. And while the radio calls and radar were unexplained, the fact that he was obeying the rules of the road cleared him and his vessel of any wrongdoing in this incident, which left the Cedarville. And Captain Martin Jopic was suspended, and his license was restricted, and it would turn out that he would never sail again as captain, because it was found that this accident was his fault. The blame was on him for failing to maintain a radar plot, failure to follow established track lines. He was outside of the established shipping lines. His failure to reduce speed in an area of restricted visibility. His failure to determine the state of his ship after the collision. And his failure to signal an abandoned ship in a timely manner. Now, if I'm recalling correctly, I don't think he ever actually did order an abandoned ship. When it was moments before the full-on sinking, it is reported that he jumped out of the Wheelhouse while others were still diligently doing their jobs at their stations, and never actually called an abandoned ship. So the conspiracy theory goes more into that. It calls into question whether or not company men at U.S. Steel were putting pressure on the captain of the Cedarville via radio. And I'll let you read the book and hear the details to draw your own conclusions as to whether or not that took place. But at the end of the day, this is a terrible tragedy that had many opportunities to have potentially been avoided. In aviation, they call it the Swiss cheese effect, right? As long as all of the holes of a Swiss cheese don't line up, an accident doesn't occur. But if several slices of Swiss cheese all have a hole that lines up, allowing the accident to occur, that's when bad things happen. And that's really what took place here with the Cedarville. If the Cedarville would have stayed in shipping lanes, it may have avoided the collision. If it wasn't as foggy, if radar had worked, if the radio had worked, if she wasn't going as fast. There's a lot of what ifs that could have led to different outcomes. But at the end of the day, none of those what ifs really matter because the events unfolded as they did and the Cedarville incident took place. Just to leave you on a couple of lighter notes, because why wouldn't you after talking about the death of 10 people and the disaster that I just talked about? The Topdalsfjord was a Norwegian vehicle. I don't know if you heard about this, but recently the Norwegian Navy put barcodes on all of their ships so that when they return to port they can Scandinavian. Terrible joke. Terrible joke. Just disrespectful. I can't believe he said that. And one last moment of the dive story for you. We've kind of returned to the part of the ship that where the anchor line is at. And we're finding the anchor line as you're about to see, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I don't think this is the right line. This isn't the right line. We didn't come down on that anchor line. And on this anchor line. And it wasn't until I got on it and actually started my ascent that I remembered back, a while ago of saying, oh yeah, we didn't come down on the anchor line at all. Visibility was such, we just did a free descent. So, once again, another little lesson for me to learn. Anyway, if you're still watching, I'm going to guess that you've been enjoying this video, or at least have found it interesting. Maybe you've been watching with the sound off, and I don't blame you if you have. But if you've enjoyed this video and dived the Cedarville, I'd certainly appreciate a comment letting me know your thoughts and what your dive plan is or was, and were you successful in carrying it out. I know divers have died diving this wreck. So I ask everyone to please dive carefully, make good choices, and stay within your limits, both the limits of your training, the limits of your experience, but also the limits of just your comfort level and your comfort level on the day you're diving it. Scandinavian. Get it? Norwegian, Scandinavian. Yeah, you got it. I know there's a door to that dining room somewhere here. think there's supposed to be a propeller there. I don't think this is the anchor line. This isn't what we came down on. What's even better is as I broke the surface of the water, I saw a boat that wasn't ours. I'm like, oh crap, we just came up on someone else's boat. Turns out ours was tied off to it. I knew that before the start of the dive. I just forgot.